I'm in the process of trying to build one of the most unique and one of the best Toyota Tacomas in North America. And in that process, I unfortunately did hit an elk. So now we have been unelking this Tacoma. And in the next part of this build series, I'm going to build a big custom specialty tool in order to build big custom specialty skid plates. Good morning. I hope you're ready to conquer the world today. I sure am. I'm headed up to the steel yard. We're gonna get some thin sheet metal so that we can finish the front fenders on this Toyota Tacoma. I'm also gonna get some steel so that we can build a giant press brake and try to build our own skid plates from scratch without using as much welding and hopefully using a little more bending. What a pro. What a pro. The 50-inch wide die that I'm going to be using for this press brake is from a company called Swag Off-Road. There's no like building plans or anything, but I kind of got a rough idea through like reading the description on what size material to start with, and then I figure we'll just kind of like measure the deflection and then stack material on top of it from there. I've got an idea in my head of how I want all this to go, but seeing as how I've never built one of these, I have no idea how long this is going to take me. We have a few problems and a few solutions. Problem A, we need to finish these fenders, and in order to do that, we're going to have to get tricky with a little bit of sheet metal work. And problem B, I want big custom skid plates, and my current press brake is not big enough to do that. So in this video, we're working on the Tacoma, but I've got to build a 50-inch press brake. Once assembled, I will be able to take a 4-foot wide sheet and we're gonna be able to put a bend in it. It's gonna be a huge deal. And while we're at it, we're going to upgrade my existing press brake with the new Swag Pro finger brake. The question is, how thick a material can we bend with this thing? And I don't know yet. I'd like to be able to go full width, 3/16 at least, but it would be very cool to go full width, meaning like a 4-foot wide sheet of quarter. Now that takes an insane amount of strength to be able to bend 4 feet of 1/4-inch plate, like for steel anyway. So I know that's being very optimistic, but I want to try to push what this thing can do eventually. So right now we're just putting it together, getting a skeleton in place, and then I can start to slowly play with this thing as we build it out in the coming weeks and figure out just how powerful this is going to be. Do you see that? That is not good. I had a feeling we would turn this into a banana because, believe it or not, I have done a ton of testing over the years, like way more than your average person has probably done, to experiment with different ways to keep things from warping, and I've learned a lot. I have noticed a percentage, quite a bit, a big percentage less warping whenever you start from the middle out. Also, of course, by leaving big gaps between your welds. So we've got like 3-inch gaps between all these welds. That reduces the warping. I have not had good luck clamping this kind of thing to a table. Whenever you unclamp it, it just springs up anyway. Oh boy, I gotta, oh man, excuse me. It's so rude. Anyway, I've also experimented a ton with heat, with using like a torch and whatnot, preheating, post-heating, all that. That's a good way to like fix a warp, but I haven't seen any noticeable difference in the reduction of warping. The reality is, if you're welding on something that's, you know, as wide as this, it's way easier to keep this from warping because it's just not very wide. That's only 19 inches wide. But when we're looking at something that's 52 inches wide, teeny tiny little bits of tension throughout are going to end up making it do this. And this is not a discrepancy in the table either, by the way. For those of you that are wondering, I did put a straight edge on it and we are absolutely warped. But because of all the testing I've done and all the welding I've done on big pieces, I was expecting this. So my strategy here to straighten this back out is I think we're gonna put the die back in it. We're gonna build the structure around it. That structure, it's a 4x6 tube that's 1/4-inch thick. It's beef. So I'm thinking that once we get that built, we're gonna put the 3 jacks on here, which is 60 tons of clamping force. And that 60 tons will very easily be able to straighten this back out. So I think that once we put it under tension, I can weld this in a few spots, let it cool. We can then relieve the tension, see how straight it is, and I might even go through with either my TIG or I might use a torch and try to heat up these welds in order to get it to basically relax the welds on this side. At least that's what makes sense in my mind. I think that that would be the best way to get this straight. The whole point is I don't want to put a nice big expensive sheet in here and then have it be kind of shaped like a smiley throughout this lower die. I'm building the frame to this thing out of 6x4 rectangular tube with a 1/4-inch wall. I know a lot of people use I-beam, and I'm not opposed to I-beam, but this is what I had. This is what I could get at the local steel yard. I could have gotten something bigger, like something taller, but it would be really hard to move around. This is already pretty hard to move around and work with. I figure what we would do is we would build like a base skeleton, and then I would start double stacking in order to make it taller and stronger. And then if we have to, we can add like some big plates on the front and back of this thing to give it like a ton of vertical resistance. Because of how this rectangular tube is constructed, there are big like radiuses on all the corners, and it makes it to where there's some really big gaps to fill, and these joints need to be super strong. So I'm basically doing this in 3 stages. I am doing a whole bunch of really hot tacks to make it to where I can like bridge between these tacks and drag my puddle without the entire thing just like blowing out and falling on the ground. And then I'm going to cover that with a root pass. So all the tacks are going to be covered with a really hot root pass. Then I'm going to cover the whole thing with a really hot cover pass. So when I say really hot, my machine's turned all the way up. I've got 035 wire instead of 030, and I'm able to lay down maximum energy out of this machine to ensure that these joints are super strong. This is not where we want to have a failure, is when it's under the stress of 3 20-ton jacks. I don't think it's going to be that bad. Woo! Do you see the vision? I'm pumped. We do have a couple small issues I need to deal with. I chamfered the edge right here to make it on both of these to give us room for that weld, but it wasn't quite enough, so I need to grind that down a touch more for this little top plate. This top plate is, I think it's 3/8. Scratch that, 1/2 inch, and that 1/2 inch is then being backed up by this 6x4 by 1/4 inch thick tube. Now that everything is built just right in front of me and I can have a really good look at it, it's easier for me to piece where to go from here. So I'm making this 1/2 inch top plate just to make it to where I wouldn't have a potential problem in the future where the head of these jacks would start to slowly like manipulate that 1/4 inch bottom bit of steel that's on the bottom of this tube. I think that if we throw some 1/2 inch on top of that, there's no way that these jacks are gonna start to slowly warp and change the shape of that tube at all. I also want to make sure that this returns really well, so I'm going to add a couple springs, and then I'm going to relocate the springs from the jacks to the, I guess we'll just call it the header. I don't know what any of this stuff's called really, but we'll just call it the header. It's the 6x4 tube that's right above the jacks. And lastly, I would like to figure out how to mount these jacks to the top part of the die. I don't want them to fall out very easily. I want them to be bolted in some way, so that's something I'm going to talk about with Nick and see if we can come up with some sort of a bracket. now want to double up all this 6x4 tube, and I'm going to measure out and send out some dimensions for a local laser cutter or plasma table cutter, whatever. They're going to cut us some huge plates that we're going to like glue to the front and back of this thing, because I want to have the maximum amount of resistance vertically to make it to where when we bend those big pieces, we're not going to mess up our tool.
Cool. Sorry. Cool.
You good? You can let go, I think.
They're coming in through the back of my mask.
60 tons of force. That is a lot of power, which is why we doubled up. This is all a foot thick now. I wanted to make sure that we have the least amount of deflection possible. Now we're at least at a point where we can start testing it and building with it a little bit. These cylinders are not going down completely even. It seems like this one outruns the other two just a hair. So that's something that I'm going to be playing with in the future. Also, I did see, dang it, I can't remember where I saw the comment. I think it might have been on my Instagram, where someone had said you could tie the three of these together in some way. Let me know in the comments how that works if you're familiar, because I would love to plumb these together and then have like one release valve for all three at the same time. That'd be super sick. Clearly, I have a ton of welding left to do. I'm gonna throw like an hour into welding this thing, and then we're gonna start bending stuff up for this Tacoma and finally work on the truck. Between Nick and I, we came up with a couple of solutions that I think are gonna work really well long term, but I did temporarily hook up the air. This is a mess, and this is something that is just kind of like gonna be spaghetti for a little while, but long term I'd like to actually run tube like hard line to the unit itself and figure out something that's a little bit cleaner, a little bit more elegant solution than just a bunch of rubber hose like teed together. But for now, the thing's working and I'm very happy about that. This is a 1/4 inch thick sheet of aluminum, and I don't know what type it is. I kind of forgot to talk to Nick about that before he went out and found this week. But it's 1/4 inch thick. We're gonna try to bend it in the press brake, and hopefully this aluminum will hold up. So what I'm thinking is that this first skid plate up here will be aluminum. I like the look of an aluminum skid plate like right underneath the bumper. And I've already thought about the skid plate a little bit, so that's why we have these 5 bolts here. We're gonna bolt the front part of the skid right into the bottom of our cross member. It's gonna angle down, and then it's gonna probably go right underneath our diff mounts. We do have a broken diff mount, which is really interesting, but I need to just decide, like from here back, it's gonna be all 3/16 steel, and I'm thinking we're gonna do basically from the transfer case all the way to here is gonna be 3 separate skid plates. And we need to build them in a way where we can bend the edges to make it strong. And I want to, basically we wanna try to take advantage of having this press brake in the fact that we don't have to weld every single seam. We're gonna have the flexibility now to put bends in a bunch of these seams and then add bends in order to add strength and rigidity to it. So now I just need to pull some basic measurements, I guess, and get a basic layout, and then decide if we want to add any like speed holes or any of that kind of thing. We'll see. We'll bend it up and then we'll make that decision. I found it to be a very rare instance where I would bang this front skid plate on anything, to be honest with you. I've only hit it, the last one I had, I only hit it on a few rocks ever. Because most of the time you're able to aim your tires up and over the big rocks, so you're not really as exposed there as you might think. However, the skid plates that are behind this one I'm doing in steel, because the ones that I had all full aluminum last time, and the ones that were underneath, all the belly skids, they did not hold up for very long being aluminum. Dude. So here's the deal. I'm installing these pressure regulators. Please focus. These are going to make it to where I can twist and dial in the pressure to each one of these, because I want to get this to where the entire thing is going to be pressing down evenly on all sides. So step one of that process, the first attempt, is going to be putting these pressure regulators in here. First one went on great. Second one, broke in half. Not good. I'm looking at this and I'm wondering if that might be a nipple in there that I just broke in half, because it definitely looks like an aluminum nipple maybe. So I'm going to try to get this out of here. I got 3 of them. I suppose I could do, you know what? We don't need 3, do we? We could set it up to where we match the other 2 to this one, knowing that this one's just a touch fast, because I've been playing with it. This one is just a touch fast. Maybe we can get away with 2. I'm going to have to see if I can get this stuff apart and make a decision from there. Unfortunately, none of my extractors are fitting in this application, but I do have a trick that I came up with, like maybe even in high school. It was a long time ago, where I just drive a Torx bit into there, and because this is such soft metal, it's aluminum, it worked like a charm. And what I like about using this method is that Torx bits, they go up fairly small, like incrementally, and it makes it to where anytime I've needed to use this trick, it's worked for me very well. And now that I have this out of there, I'm able to move on and slowly figure out the timing of this thing. This is what I think is going to be the most challenging part of this entire project, and that is trying to tune these. Step 1 of attempting to tune these is going to be regulating the pressure going in. I don't even want to talk about step 2 and 3. Let's hope that this works. And then I don't know how well it's going to work without 3 regulators, but if I have to order a third, that's not a big deal. So before, this one just slightly outran the other 2. No way. No way, did I just nail that? Wow, I think we accidentally nailed it. I set this one below the other 2. This regulator's open up all the way, and then the middle one has no regulator. These 2 were matching perfectly before, but I turned the pressure down on this one quite a bit just to see if there was an effect. And that looked like it came down perfectly even. So I guess the next step of testing is gonna be throwing some material in there and seeing how well it's pressing it all together. 21. Ooh, it's considerably more. 22.5, that's half of a 45. It's a really nice looking bend, very uniform. And when I look down it's the same throughout. Now this is not a very long bend, but honestly, most of the things you're gonna bend in the shop are not gonna be the full width of the press brake, right? But these are good test bends. I really like the way those look. They're both at exactly a 45 degree. We're really close to a 45 degree. I bent them with the angle finder. We're able to measure half of the, I might even in-frame. We're able to measure half of the total bend, which was 22.5, is what I bent both of these 2. And I mean, come on, that's a sharp looking start to a skid plate. There is a huge con to using skid plates. We all know the pros, it protects your stuff, but the con is that you add a lot of weight typically. So the last set of skids I did were all aluminum. It was 1/4-inch aluminum on both, I think it was 2 skids, either way. The whole skid system was all aluminum. The front one held up great, but the rear one, or rear 2, I don't remember, did not hold up well at all. I think for like someone who goes overlanding, who might dabble in a complicated trail occasionally, aluminum would probably be great, but if you're like me and you like rocks, aluminum skids are not where it's at. However, I want to save weight as much as possible. I know that I can keep this front skid off of rocks for the most part. I mean, it's going to get dinged here and there, but I don't think it's going to be, it shouldn't be any worse than it was before, especially once we put the portals on. So I'm using aluminum in the front to shave as much weight as possible. We're going to do the other 2 skid plates in 3/16 steel because it's going to be stronger, but with it being 3/16, I'm hoping that with just like a little bit of ribbing and like being smart about where we place certain features, we can make them strong enough. It's kind of hard to say until we actually go hit the trails, but because they are individual, if one ends up getting tacoed and the other one seems to do okay, then we can upsize if we have to and go to quarter, but gosh, I really don't want to use 1/4 inch steel on any of this. It's just too big and too heavy. What do you think?
Okay.
Yeah. I like it, Nick.
Yeah?
It's got that sweet V taper, like my 6-pack. If only. Nick is going to continue to chip away at these skid plates, and I am going to try to unbreak something. I don't remember what the state of the Tacoma was in whenever I hit the elk, but I was on my way home from a big trip, and we didn't notice that I had broke this lower diff mount until we pulled the skid plates off. So I might have had like a clunk up there. It's just after the elk situation, it completely like wiped my memory of what the truck was doing before then. So anyway, we were surprised to see this broken in half, and it's, I think, cast steel, but I'm still going to treat it like cast iron in the main repair. So I'm using a cast iron rod. We're going to heat this up in my fireplace to over 400 degrees is like the rule of thumb. Probably under like 1,000 to 1,200. Like you don't want to get it too hot either. And then I'm going to weld it with a high nickel rod. I also cut out some gussets to reinforce this in the future, as well as I use that nickel rod to like fill in the sides of the repair. So this should be considerably stronger now, but time will tell. In any case, to buy a new diff mount was like $300, and this cost me like $18 worth of nickel rod, so it was an hour well spent, in my opinion. Yeah, that's kind of the way I looked at it. I really like the finish of this cast blast. Looks good on there. I got this a few years ago. I haven't used it yet until today, but I dig it. And this looks like, you know, a repaired part. Saved us a few $100. Hopefully it works. Nick has been building our skid plate, and we're ready for me to do a little bit of TIG welding. We've got a hole for the oil plug, the oil drain plug, and then we had to make a little spot that's spaced down. So I'm gonna TIG this just because I want a low build weld around here, but it's all coming together, looking pretty good. Because the aluminum skid plate is so visible, I want to church it up a little bit. I want to take it up a notch, as it were. So I want to use dimple dies, but I have not dimpled 1/4 inch steel in my memory. So we did a test piece just to make sure that it's actually going to do what we want it to do. And it seemed to dimple just fine. So I'm going to add some dimples to the front of this, which is good because it's going to actually strengthen it up a little bit. It's going to make it look good. You know, you drop a little bit of weight. I mean, I don't know how many ounces of aluminum I'm shedding, but looking at it, I don't think there's a reason that I couldn't just bend it at the halfway point. We'll just flatten it out at the halfway point. It'd probably be easier to do that way anyway. I guess what I'm saying is that I like dimple dies, so I want to use them when I can.
Back half, do you think it fits?
I don't know if it'll fit. It's such little material back there. 20.6. Ah, dude, I think that looks right, Nick.
Yeah.
We are so close to getting what we want. This is like kind of the most important skid because of what it's protecting and what it has to clear. And unfortunately, the diff ends up just barely touching right here, so we're really close. We've got this is a little, like, I don't know if you call it a buck out, whatever. It's a little droop or dead space that we made because there's a bolt that is really close to hitting this. This is for the for changing the oil. That is going to be where our drain plug goes. And then we're going to have to cut somewhere in here and make it drop down just a touch in order to clear that diff. But all in all, I'm still pretty hyped on the way that this skid plate is turning out, how it drops down here and then it goes back up right there. We've just got some more cutting and modifying to do in order to make this fit correctly. We got this side tightened up completely, no problem, but this side, once we got it close to here-ish, it doesn't want to go any higher because we are just barely hitting that diff. So now we're going to mark it. We're going to cut a little spot that we're going to have to droop down a little bit. And I mean, the good thing is we're not making the entire skid system to the level of its lowest point. We're trying to keep it as high as possible and then only droop down in the places that need it. So the diff will hang down a little bit. We're going to have to build some sort of little box that's really strong. But we're still going to have high clearance everywhere else instead of having the weak link set the height from the ground up to the center of this skid plate. It's our final day of work this week, and we have a lot to try to accomplish today. I don't think we're going to get the skids completely done, but we are going to try like hell. So Nick is going to finish smoothing out and doing some last-minute modifications to our center skid, and then he's going to get started on the rear skid. In the meantime, I'm going to add a couple of things that I think are going to benefit the press brake. Plan A for tuning that press brake was a partial failure. Plan B. Well, remember we broke one of these. I'm going to replace that one. The jack all the way to the left is now the slowest, and it started as the fastest. I have a feeling that one of these may have gotten clogged. So the new plan, phase 2, as it were, is going to be adding some little inline air filters to keep any debris or anything from getting into these. And then hopefully it's kind of a set it and forget it type of thing. I mean, I don't know. This is going to be one of those things where, like, if it sits for a few months and I go to use it again, I'll probably just make sure everything is timed and that the two dies, like, you know, do that chopping motion, I guess, at the same time. And then I can just slightly tune the pressure here or there. I mean, it was like dead nuts the same all the way across initially. It just all of a sudden stopped working well. And so I'm hoping we just haven't plugged up one of these guys. Having filters and regulators on all three of these jacks seem to smooth things out or spread things out much more evenly. I'm very confident that this is the right direction. So eventually we are going to make this not just be spaghetti mess in the back of the press brake, but for now I at least have like a system that I can use and test. We got one more bend here. There's a guess. That's a guess.
And it switches.
Oh! We got the big reveal. It's looking pretty good down there. This is 1/4-inch aluminum. I like the way that turned out. And it's high enough. It's not hanging down near as low as the last set of skids were that we pulled off of here. And it's pretty obvious why. Like, they made their skid system to be super universal. You know, they would go off of like what the lowest point is. But the bottom of this skid is basically the same as the bottom of that A-arm right there. And then boom, we are into the next skid. And this middle one, we've got, it dives down once and then comes back up. So we had to get it below a few of these things. Oh, dude, this is gonna be so hard to shoot without this being on a lift. But you can kind of see what we're working with here. And anywhere that we had a hole, I wanted to weld extra protection around so that a rock doesn't come up and rip that hole and open these skid plates up. So we're also planning on adding a spine along the inside in order to give it a little bit more bash resistance. And then we've got our third one back there. All right, so you can see what we're going for here. This, once it gets bolted down into this one, is gonna be like level. And then the whole thing comes up slightly right there. It's gonna tip up and then go into another skid that I don't think I've ever shown you guys. But you can kind of see what we got going on, dude. Oh, I hope this is turning out at all. So, yeah, you can see where we put the bend right there. I'm gonna experiment with our dimple dies and see if we can dimple this 3/16 steel. If so, I'm gonna be adding a lot of dimples to reduce weight and to add some strength. And then this goes into a drive shaft skid that I built quite a long time ago, but has worked really well for us. We made it narrow, and so it doesn't weigh a whole lot, but it's just extra protection for the drive shaft right there. And then we've got these big old skids right here that are for the battery, because if you remember earlier in the series, we relocated the battery under here. So once we finish this and we get all these anchored in together, I plan on doing another lightweight skid, small one for right here, because I have already ruined 2 exhaust systems in that exact spot. And we spent a lot of time in this, so we'll put some sort of a trough or something that's gonna tie into all this. But as you can see, it's all coming along. And there's a lot of vehicles I own that I wouldn't skid this much, but with something that has this long a wheelbase, I have learned from wheeling all over the country that this likes to drag everywhere. Also, these bolts, this is like just flipped around temporarily. We're actually using carriage bolts, so it'll be like a smooth bolt head on the bottom side, which should just slide right up and over obstacles and stuff. Early next week, I have huge plates showing up. I had a local company, CNC Plasma, out some really big gussets for this thing to be the cherry on top, because I mean, it seems plenty strong. I don't want to bend quarter or bigger until we have this done, because what I'm concerned with is that we're going to slowly start to bow this out. So what these plates are going to do is they're huge. Once we weld them in front and back, these 3/16 plates are going to give us a ton more strength vertically in order to give it the ability to resist the 60 tons worth of hydraulic ram. So far, extremely excited about the amount of work we can get done without welding. And I look forward to playing with this a bunch more, maybe even getting some hemming dies and whatnot. So now, this is as far as we could get this week. The snow's falling in the mountains hard right now. So as soon as I push stop record, I'm going and I'm loading up Yeti, and tomorrow morning I'm heading up to the mountains. I'm gonna do the first camping trip in Yeti. Very, very excited about that. And the first time driving it to the trail instead of towing it. That's our time clock, believe it or not. All right, YouTube, don't demonetize me for stealing that song. I hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you on the next one.